Every Christmas found me alone, sitting in my apartment and scrolling through Instagram photos of my entire family celebrating together at my grandmother's beach house. Every year I stared at those pictures, asking myself the same question: what did I do that made them leave me out? I never received an explanation, no apology, not even a simple message. Then last January, my grandmother Eleanor Whitmore passed away. I didn't learn about it through a phone call. I found out from a Facebook post. No one in my family contacted me. I arrived late to the funeral because no one told me the service time had been moved. 3 weeks later, a lawyer reached out to me with a secret my grandmother had kept from everyone, including my mother. She had left me the beach house. I told no one. For 11 months, I kept quiet and waited. And this Christmas Eve, when 23 relatives arrived expecting their usual holiday vacation, they discovered me standing at the front door. What happened after that changed everything. I'm always curious to see how far these stories travel. Your support really motivates me to keep sharing stories like this. Now let me take you back 11 months, to the day I received a call from a lawyer named Jonathan Reeves. The truth is, I first learned my grandmother had died from Facebook, not from my mother, not from my sister Hannah Caldwell. A distant cousin had shared a photo of Grandma Eleanor smiling in her garden with the caption, "Rest in peace, Aunt Eleanor." I sat in my apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina, staring at my phone and waiting for someone, anyone, to call me. No one did. The funeral was 3 days later. I drove nearly 4 hours to get there. By the time I arrived, the service had already begun. No one had mentioned the schedule had changed. I slipped quietly into the back row. My mother, Rebecca Turner, never turned around. Hannah glanced at me once, then quickly looked away as if I were a stranger who had wandered into the wrong church. After the burial, I tried to approach my mother. She stood surrounded by relatives, accepting condolences and pressing a tissue against her eyes. "Mom," I said. She looked at me the way someone might look at an interruption. "Layla, you made it." That was all. No hug. No, "I'm glad you're here." Just those 3 words, "You made it." As if I'd appeared uninvited at someone else's gathering. 3 weeks later, I received a phone call. "Miss Turner, this is Jonathan Reeves. I served as your grandmother's attorney." I hadn't even known Eleanor Whitmore had a lawyer. "I need to meet with you privately," he said. "And please don't tell anyone in your family about this call." My heart began racing. "Is something wrong?" "No, Miss Turner," he replied calmly. "Something is very right." He paused before continuing. "Your grandmother left very specific instructions. She believed you would understand why this conversation needed to remain between us." The next morning I drove across Raleigh to meet him, having no idea I was about to inherit the one thing my mother had wanted for decades. But to understand why that mattered, you need to know about the Christmas photos. The first one appeared when I was 17, December 26, 2009. I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw it. My entire family gathered inside Grandma Eleanor's living room. My mother stood proudly in the center with her arm around Hannah. Aunts, uncles, and cousins filled the room. 23 people laughing, exchanging gifts, all wearing matching red sweaters. I wasn't there. That night I called my mother. "Mom, why wasn't I invited to Christmas?" She sighed as if I were overreacting. "Oh, honey, we thought you were staying with your college prep group. Didn't I mention it?" She hadn't. The following year, the explanation changed. "We assumed you were working." The year after that, the group text must not have gone through. Then came the familiar line. "You're always welcome. Why didn't you just come?" I tried that once. I was 23 when I drove to Cape Hatteras in the Outer Banks without telling anyone. I thought maybe if I simply showed up, they'd have to include me. I knocked on the door. My mother opened it, and for a moment her face turned pale, like she'd just seen something impossible. "Layla? What are you doing here? How did you—" From inside the house I heard Hannah's voice clearly. "Did anyone actually invite her?" The room fell silent. 23 people stared at me as if I had crashed a private event. My mother recovered quickly. Of course you're welcome, honey, come in. But I saw the looks, the whispers that stopped when I passed by, and the way Hannah made sure there was no seat left for me at the dinner table. I left the next morning. After that, I never tried again. For 15 years, I spent every Christmas alone, scrolling through photos of a family that acted like I didn't exist. Until Eleanor Whitmore changed everything. To understand why my mother erased me from the family, you have to understand Michael Turner. He was my father. He died when I was 3 years old. I don't truly remember him, only fragments. The sharp smell of turpentine in his studio, the low sound of his voice humming old jazz melodies, the way he used to lift me onto his shoulders so I could reach up and touch the clouds. My father, Michael Turner, was a painter, a dreamer who cared more about beauty than bank accounts. My mother, Rebecca Turner, married him when she was just 19. She was young, impulsive, completely in love. Her parents warned her. Her friends tried to talk her out of it, but Rebecca followed her heart. For a while that seemed enough. Then reality caught up with them. Michael struggled to hold a steady job, his paintings rarely sold. They lived in a small one-bedroom apartment with a leaking roof and a crying baby who kept them awake most nights. When I was 3, Michael was driving home from a gallery showing, his first real opportunity for recognition. On the way back, a truck ran a red light. He died instantly. The paintings that no one wanted while he was alive are now worth 6 figures. But my mother never cared about the money. She only wanted to forget. 2 years later, she remarried. Thomas Caldwell, stable, successful, predictable, the opposite of everything my father had been. When I was 7, my half-sister Hannah Caldwell was born, and little by little, almost carefully, my mother began removing Michael Turner from our lives. She never spoke about him. She never showed me photographs. If relatives mentioned her first marriage, she quickly changed the subject. And me? I carry his eyes. Blue-gray. Unusual. Impossible to miss. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, was the only person who ever told me the truth. One night, after another Christmas I'd spent alone, I was sitting on her porch crying. She looked at me gently and said, "Your mother doesn't hate you, Layla. She hates what you remind her of." At the time, I didn't understand, but the day I walked into Jonathan Reeves's office, I finally did. His law office was located in a brick building downtown, one of those quiet places that smells faintly of old books and serious decisions. He was older than I expected, silver-haired and warm, with a handshake that felt reassuring. "Thank you for coming, Miss Turner," he said, gesturing toward a leather chair. "Please have a seat." I sat down, trying to steady my hands. Without saying anything else, he slid a cream-colored envelope across the desk. "Your grandmother asked me to give you this first," he said, "before we discuss the legal matters." My name was written across the envelope in Eleanor Whitmore's shaky handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single handwritten page. "My dearest Layla, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But before I left, I needed to set something right. You are the only one in this family who never asked me for anything. You came to visit every Sunday, not for my money, not for the house, but for me. You called just to hear my voice. You stayed with me when I was sick, when I was scared, when I was lonely. Your mother and your sister came when they needed something. You came because you loved me. So I'm leaving you everything. They will say I was confused. They will say you manipulated me. But I have never been more certain of anything. The beach house is yours, all of it. Do with it whatever you wish. Just promise me one thing. Stop being invisible. With all my love, Grandma." I looked up at Jonathan Reeves, my eyes stinging. "The beach house?" I whispered. "She left me the beach house?" He nodded calmly. "The deed, the land, the property, everything. Your grandmother drafted the will 5 years ago and updated it twice to prevent any legal challenges." He leaned forward slightly. "Miss Turner, your grandmother expected there might be resistance. This will is extremely solid." I sat there for a long time, clutching her letter like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. The beach house. The place where my entire family gathered every Christmas without me. The house where they posed in matching sweaters for photos while pretending I didn't exist. The property worth $3 million, the one my mother had wanted for decades, and Eleanor Whitmore had left it to me. Jonathan cleared his throat gently. Miss Turner, I need to ask you something. Would you like me to notify your family about the will? I looked at him. 15 years, 15 Christmases, 15 times I had watched my family celebrate together through a screen while I sat alone wondering what I had done wrong. And now, for the first time in my life, I had something they wanted. No, I said quietly. Not yet. Jonathan nodded slowly, almost like he had expected that answer. Your grandmother predicted you might say that. She did? He opened a drawer and took out another envelope, smaller this time, sealed with a bit of wax. She left me instructions, he explained. She told me that if you decided to wait, I should give you this. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sentence written in her handwriting. I knew you'd need time. Take all the time you need. But when you're ready, show them who you are. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. Mr. Reeves, I asked quietly, how long does it take to transfer the deed? With your cooperation, about 3 weeks. And if I want to keep everything private? He smiled slightly. I've been practicing estate law for 40 years, Miss Turner. I know how to be discreet. I stood up. Then let's begin. 11 months. That's how long I waited. And in that time, I learned what my grandmother already knew. Patience isn't weakness. It's strategy. That year felt like I was living 2 completely different lives. In one life, I was Layla Turner, a senior accountant working at a private firm in Raleigh. My days were predictable, filing reports, attending meetings, eating quiet lunches alone at my desk. In the other life, I was slowly becoming the legal owner of a $2.3 million beach house, a property my family still believed belonged to them. In February, I signed the final documents. Jonathan Reeves handed me a set of keys and a thick folder filled with legal paperwork. It's finished, he said. The property is officially yours. Spring came. Easter passed in April. No invitation. I hadn't expected one. In July, on Hannah Caldwell's birthday, I opened Instagram and saw dozens of photos taken at the beach house. My mother stood on the deck raising a glass of champagne. Hannah blew out candles while everyone cheered. My cousin's kids ran through the same living room I now owned. 47 photos in total. I saved every single one. Documentation, Jonathan had called it, evidence of unauthorized use. In September, something even stranger happened. While checking my email, I noticed a forwarded message from Margaret Dawson, my grandmother's younger sister. It was from a family group chat I had never been included in. My mother had written, Mom's beach house needs maintenance. I'm scheduling a contractor next month. I'll handle the bill. She was organizing repairs on my house, paying to renovate my property without even knowing it. I called Jonathan immediately. What should I do? Send a letter, he said calmly, and keep every receipt. She's increasing the value of your asset, for free. The contractor arrived in October. New roof shingles, fresh paint on the deck, upgraded appliances in the kitchen. My mother spent $12,000 renovating a house she didn't own. I saved every invoice. By November, I started making plans. On December 23rd, I drove to the Outer Banks carrying a folder full of legal documents and 15 years of silence distilled into one word: enough. About a week before Christmas, I made a phone call to the Dare County Sheriff's Office. I'd like to report a potential trespassing situation, I explained. I own a property in the Outer Banks, and I have reason to believe several people may attempt to enter without permission on December 24th. The deputy on the phone introduced himself as Daniel Brooks. His voice was calm and professional. Ma'am, can you prove ownership? I have the deed, title documents, property tax records, and the previous owner's will, all notarized. There was a brief pause. That's thorough, he said. I've had 11 months to prepare. We agreed to meet on Christmas Eve morning. He would review my documents, and if everything checked out, he'd be there when my family arrived. Before hanging up, he hesitated. "Ma'am, are you sure about this? Family situations can get complicated." I thought about 15 Christmases spent watching my family celebrate without me. "Deputy," I replied, "my family has been using my property for 15 years without my knowledge or consent. I'd say it's already complicated." The night before my flight, my phone buzzed. "Layla, it's Margaret Dawson," my great-aunt said. "I just wanted to check on you." I nearly dropped the phone. Margaret was the only relative who had ever asked about me, the only one who sometimes questioned the story my mother told everyone. "I'm okay, Aunt Margaret." "Are you sure, honey?" she asked gently. "I've always wondered why you're never at these family gatherings. Rebecca says you prefer to be alone, but—" Her voice faded. "Aunt Margaret," I said carefully, "you'll understand soon." "What do you mean?" "Just don't be surprised tomorrow." There was a long pause. "Layla," she said quietly, "what are you planning?" I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd had in months. "I'm just going to show up for once." I ended the call, packed my bag, and went to sleep. Tomorrow I would stop being invisible. The beach house looked exactly the way I remembered. I arrived on the evening of December 23rd, just as the sun was setting over Cape Hatteras. The key Jonathan had given me slid perfectly into the new lock I'd installed 2 months earlier. My mother's key would no longer work. I stepped inside and paused in the entryway, breathing in the familiar scent of salt air and aged wood. The last time I had stood in that house, I was 23, uninvited and unwanted. I had slipped out before breakfast the next morning. Now I was back. And this time, the house belonged to me. I walked slowly from room to room, the living room with its stone fireplace, the kitchen my mother had unknowingly renovated for me, the upstairs bedrooms, each one filled with memories of Christmases I had only ever seen through photographs. On the mantel, I found the picture I remembered. A framed photo from 3 years earlier, 23 people wearing matching red sweaters, smiling for the camera. Eleanor Whitmore sat in the center, looking tired but happy. I wasn't in the photo, I never was. I picked up the frame and studied it. My mother stood beside Grandma with a possessive hand on her shoulder. Hannah stood on the other side holding her daughter. Aunts, uncles, cousins filled every empty space. There had never been room for me. I placed the photo on the coffee table. Tomorrow they would see it again. They would remember exactly where they were standing when their world changed. In my grandmother's bedroom, I found something else. A smaller frame I had never seen before. It was a picture of me and Eleanor, taken 6 months before she died. We were sitting together on this very porch, laughing about something I could no longer remember. She had kept it beside her bed, hidden from the others. I carried the photo back to the living room and placed it in the center of the mantel. Tomorrow, I wouldn't be invisible anymore. Christmas Eve, 7 a.m. I woke up in my grandmother's bed, my bed now, to the sound of waves crashing beyond the windows. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered. Today was the day. I showered, dried my hair, and opened the small suitcase I had brought from Raleigh. Inside were documents, toiletries, and one carefully chosen outfit. A deep burgundy cashmere sweater, my grandmother's favorite color. She used to say red was for people who refused to disappear. I put it on, applied light makeup, and finished with classic red lipstick, the same shade Eleanor always wore. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the woman who had spent 15 years being erased. I saw someone ready. At 8:30 my phone rang. "Miss Turner, this is Deputy Brooks. I'm on my way." "Thank you, Deputy. I'll have everything ready." I spread my documents across the dining room table, the will, the property deed, tax records proving I'd paid the last 11 months. The contractor invoices my mother had unknowingly created, Jonathan's letter confirming the legal transfer, and 23 eviction notices, one for every adult in my family. Deputy Brooks arrived at 10 a.m. He was tall, in his mid-40s, with the calm expression of someone who had seen every kind of human conflict imaginable. He reviewed each document carefully. "This all looks legitimate, ma'am," he finally said. Then he looked up. "You really own this place." "I do. And your family doesn't know." "They will in about 2 hours." He nodded slowly. "I'll stay here when they arrive." Then he added quietly, "But are you sure about this? Once it happens, there's no undoing it." I thought about 15 Christmases, 15 years of silence, 15 years of watching through a screen. "I've never been more sure of anything." He handed the papers back. "Then we wait." At 11:47 a.m., I saw the first car turn onto the gravel road. I was standing at the upstairs window watching. Deputy Daniel Brooks remained in his patrol car, parked quietly behind a cluster of trees at the edge of the property. From the upstairs window, I watched the procession arrive. My mother's silver SUV turned onto the gravel road first. Behind it came Hannah Caldwell's white Range Rover, then Thomas Caldwell's black BMW, followed by car after car after car. Aunts, uncles, cousins, their spouses, their children. 6 vehicles in total, 23 people, along with suitcases, Christmas decorations, and enough groceries to feed an army. They climbed out of their cars with the casual confidence of people who believed the house belonged to them, because they thought it did. I watched Rebecca Turner stride toward the front door, the keys in her hand clinking together. She wore a cream-colored coat and a string of pearls, always pearls. Her posture radiated authority, the quiet certainty of someone who believed she was in charge. Hannah followed right behind her, already directing her husband. "Put the big suitcases in the master bedroom," she called out. "Mom and Dad always take that room." My room now, my master bedroom. The kids ran ahead laughing and shouting about the beach, about presents, about everything they always did during Christmas week at Grandma Eleanor's house. Except it wasn't Grandma Eleanor's house anymore. Behind them all, almost unnoticed, Deputy Brooks's patrol car slowly rolled out from its hiding place and approached the driveway. No one paid attention. They were too busy unloading luggage, talking loudly, and claiming rooms. I started down the stairs. Each step creaked beneath my feet, those same wooden stairs I had crept down years earlier when I was 23, trying to stay invisible, trying desperately to belong. I wasn't trying anymore. I reached the front door just as my mother inserted her key into the lock. The metal clicked, then came the confusion. "What the? Thomas? The key isn't working." I smiled and opened the door. The expression on my mother's face when the door swung open is something I will never forget. She stood frozen on the porch, key still in her hand, mouth halfway open to complain about the lock. Then she saw me. For 3 full seconds, no one spoke. I stood calmly in the doorway wearing my burgundy sweater, my grandmother's color, one hand resting casually on the frame. Behind me, the fire I'd lit that morning crackled softly in the living room. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and cedar. Christmas. "Layla," my mother said, her voice cracking. How did you get in here?" "Good morning, Mom." I didn't move. Thomas Caldwell stepped forward behind her, frowning. "The lock must be broken. Let me try." "The lock isn't broken," I said evenly. "It's new. I replaced it." Silence fell across the porch. Hannah pushed forward, confusion twisting her face. "You changed the locks on Mom's house?" "It isn't Mom's house." My mother let out a sharp, uneasy laugh. "Layla, what are you talking about? This is my mother's property. I don't know what kind of—" "It's my property," I said calmly. "And it has been for 11 months. The silence deepened. Behind the cluster of relatives, I saw Deputy Brooks step out of his patrol car. He remained near the vehicle, watching quietly. Margaret Dawson was the first to notice him. "Rebecca, why is there a police officer here?" Everyone turned at once. 23 pairs of eyes locked onto the patrol car as if it had appeared out of thin air. "I asked him to come," I said. My mother's confusion quickly hardened into anger. "What situation?" she demanded. "What are you talking about?" "I think we should continue this conversation outside," I replied. considering this is my home, and none of you have been invited in. I stepped backward and began closing the door. Wait! My mother lunged forward. You can't do this! Actually, I said quietly, I can. I opened the door wider, not to invite them in, but so every person standing on the porch could see me clearly. The cold December wind swept across the steps. My family stood clustered together like carolers who had forgotten their song. Children clung to their parents. Suitcases sat abandoned on the gravel driveway. This is ridiculous, my mother snapped. Thomas, call the police. The police are already here, ma'am. Deputy Brooks walked calmly up the path toward us. I'm Deputy Daniel Brooks, he said. I was asked to assist Ms. Turner with a property matter. There is no property matter, my mother shouted. This is my mother's house. With respect, ma'am, the deputy replied evenly. It is not. He stopped beside me. I have reviewed the deed, the will, and the county property records. This residence belongs to Layla Turner. It has for nearly a year. The words spread through the crowd like a shockwave. Aunts exchanged uneasy glances. Uncles shifted their weight. Hannah grabbed her husband's arm as if she needed something to steady herself. That's impossible, Hannah said. Grandma would never do that. She did. I reached behind the door and pulled out the folder I had prepared 11 months earlier. This is a copy of her will, I said. Signed, witnessed, and notarized. She left the beach house to me, completely and exclusively. My mother snatched the papers from my hands. Her eyes raced across the pages, and with every line her face grew paler. This isn't real, she said breathlessly. She was confused. She had dementia. Her physician confirmed she was mentally competent until 2 weeks before her death, I replied calmly. She knew exactly what she was doing. Margaret Dawson stepped forward slowly, her hand pressed against her chest. Layla, Eleanor left it to you? I met her eyes. She was the only person standing there who had ever wondered why I was missing every Christmas. Yes, Aunt Margaret, I said softly. She did. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Deputy Brooks stepped forward again, and the crowd instinctively parted around him. Folks, he said calmly, I understand this situation may come as a surprise, but the law is clear. Ms. Turner is the legal owner of this property. I've personally verified the documents. Thomas Caldwell cleared his throat. Officer, there must be some misunderstanding. Our family has been using this house for 15 years. Yes, I said quietly, without my permission, because I didn't even know I owned it until 11 months ago. You didn't know? Hannah said skeptically. How convenient. Your grandmother chose to keep it private, Deputy Brooks replied. That was her decision, and now it is Ms. Turner's decision how she wishes to proceed. My mother still gripped the documents in trembling hands. I'm calling a lawyer, she said. This will is fraudulent. My mother would never do something like this. She did, I said, holding her gaze steadily. She also expected you to say exactly that, I replied calmly. Which is why she asked Jonathan Reeves, an estate attorney with 40 years of experience, to draft the will with extra safeguards against any legal challenge. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thick stack of documents, each stamped with an official seal. These are eviction notices, I said, handing them out one by one. One for every adult here. The papers moved slowly through the crowd, some people reading them immediately, others simply staring. You have 30 minutes to remove any personal belongings from your vehicles, I continued evenly. After that, if you're still on my property, Deputy Brooks will escort you off for trespassing. From the back of the group, Lucas Bennett, one of my cousins, raised his voice. Layla, come on, it's Christmas Eve. Can't we just talk about this? We could have talked, I replied with a shrug. During any of the 15 Christmases you spent here without inviting me. I glanced at the notices in their hands. I have time now. Do you? No one answered. My mother suddenly exploded. You manipulated her, she shouted, throwing the folder to the ground so the papers scattered across the porch. You poisoned her against us. You scheming, ungrateful. When was the last time you visited her, Mom? The words cut through her rant like a blade. She stopped mid-sentence. I visited her every Sunday for 5 years, I continued quietly. I sat with her when she was afraid. I held her hand when she was dying. I took a breath. When was the last time you came? And I don't mean Christmas when you wanted to use the house. I mean just to see her. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. No answer. Hannah Caldwell jumped in quickly. That still doesn't give you the right to steal our inheritance. Your inheritance? I laughed. A strange, unfamiliar sound. You mean the house you've been using for free for 15 years? I turned toward the rest of the family. The house where my mother scheduled renovations without even asking who owned it? Their eyes shifted uneasily. My mother paid $12,000 in October to remodel that kitchen, I added. She didn't ask me. She didn't even realize she should because she assumed the house belonged to her. Margaret Dawson's voice suddenly cut through the tension. Rebecca, when was the last time you invited Layla to Christmas? The question hung in the cold air like smoke. My mother spun toward her sister. That's not... She never wanted to come. Layla prefers to be alone. I didn't prefer to be alone, I said quietly. I just was never told when the gathering was. Silence. 23 people stood there, and not one of them could meet my eyes. Then my mother said the words that changed everything. Fine, she snapped. You want to know why you were never invited? Her voice shook. Because I can't stand looking at you. Every time I see your face, I see him. She pointed at me. Your father. That useless dreaming artist who ruined my life. The entire porch fell completely still. If you're listening to this right now, you might be thinking she should have talked to them first. Maybe you're right. But let me ask you something. If someone ignores you for 15 years, do you still owe them a conversation? Type yes if you think I should have talked to them first. Type no if you think actions speak louder. I read every comment. The silence after my mother's outburst was unlike anything I had ever felt. 23 people stood frozen in the December cold. Their breath formed pale clouds in the air. Even the children had gone quiet, sensing something had shifted. Hannah's voice came out strained. Mom, what are you talking about? My mother's face had turned white. She stared down at her hands like they belonged to someone else. I didn't mean... She started weakly. That's not what I... Michael Turner, I said softly. My father. The man you married before Thomas Caldwell. The man you've spent 30 years trying to erase. Thomas stepped forward, confusion written across his face. Rebecca, what is she talking about? My mother couldn't even look at him. Margaret spoke quietly. You excluded your own daughter because of Michael. You don't understand, my mother whispered, her voice breaking. Every time I look at her, I see him. His eyes, his expressions. I see every mistake I made, every year I wasted. She was a child, Margaret said sharply. She didn't choose her father. She didn't choose his eyes. I know that, my mother shouted. Then more quietly, almost defeated. I know that. I looked at her carefully, the woman who had slowly erased me from family gatherings for 15 years, the woman who had convinced everyone I was the one choosing distance, the woman who had taught my sister that I didn't matter. And to my surprise, I didn't feel anger. I felt something else, pity. You couldn't forgive a dead man, I said softly. So you punished the only part of him that was still alive. For a brief moment, my mother's face collapsed as if she might cry. But she didn't apologize. She never did. I could have destroyed her right there. I could have listed every Christmas she excluded me from, every lie she told, every moment she made me feel invisible. But that wasn't why I had come. Deputy Brooks, I said, turning away from her, please give them 30 minutes to remove their belongings. After that, I want everyone off my property. Now hold on a minute, Thomas began. 30 minutes, Thomas, I said calmly. That's already more consideration than I've ever been given. Hannah pulled her daughter closer. Layla, the kids. It's Christmas Eve. You can't just throw us out with nowhere to go. There are 3 hotels in town, I replied evenly. I called yesterday. They have rooms available and I asked them to hold blocks for a large family. Hannah's mouth fell open. I'm not trying to ruin anyone's Christmas, I added quietly. I'm not trying to make anyone suffer. I just want what should have been mine all along, the right to decide who enters my home. Deputy Brooks stepped forward. You heard her, folks. 30 minutes. I'll be keeping time. Slowly, reluctantly, the family began to move. Suitcases went back into trunks. Children were guided into cars. Doors slammed shut with dull, hollow sounds. My mother remained on the porch, staring at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. Layla, she whispered, please. I looked into her eyes, the same blue-gray eyes I saw every morning in the mirror. You had 15 years to say please, I told her quietly. You chose silence instead. Then I stepped inside and closed the door. I leaned back against it, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Through the window, I watched the cars begin to leave, one by one, tires crunching against the gravel road. Then came a knock. My muscles tensed. I thought my mother had come back. Layla, a voice called softly. It's Margaret. I opened the door. Margaret Dawson stood alone on the porch. The other cars had already disappeared down the road. She hadn't left with them. May I come in? She asked quietly. I stepped aside. She walked slowly into the house, looking around as if seeing it differently now. I should have spoken up years ago, she said thickly. Every year I asked Rebecca why you weren't there. Every year she had an explanation. She wiped at her eyes. Layla likes her space. Layla has work. Layla prefers being alone. And you believed her? I asked. I did, Margaret admitted softly. That's on me. I should have called you directly. I should have demanded answers. Why didn't you? She hesitated for a long moment. Because it was easier not to, she said quietly. Rebecca can be convincing, and I didn't want to start a conflict. So you chose peace over me? Yes. No excuses, no defense, just the truth. Margaret reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Eleanor gave me this, she said, 2 months before she passed away. She made me promise not to show anyone until after she was gone. I took the paper and unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakably Eleanor Whitmore's. Margaret, make sure Layla knows she wasn't imagining things. It was real. Everything she felt was real. My hands started to tremble. She knew, I whispered. Margaret nodded slowly. She saw everything, she said softly. And she wanted you to know you were never crazy. For the first time that day, I let myself cry. Through the front window, I watched the last cars disappear down the gravel road. Hannah Caldwell's white Range Rover was the final one to leave. In the back seat, I saw her daughter's face pressed against the glass, watching the beach house shrink into the distance. I wondered what they would tell her. Probably that Aunt Layla had gone crazy, that she had stolen the house, that she was the villain in their version of the family story. It didn't matter anymore. Earlier, Thomas Caldwell's BMW had paused before pulling away. He lowered the window and looked at me standing in the doorway. Layla, he said quietly, I'm sorry for everything. I studied the man who had been my stepfather for 27 years, the man who had watched my mother slowly erase me and had never once spoken up. That's a start, Thomas, I replied. But sorry doesn't erase 15 years. He nodded slowly, like he already knew that. I should have done more. Yes, I said simply. You should have. He rolled up his window and drove away. My mother never looked back. She sat stiffly in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead as the car turned onto the main road. Deputy Daniel Brooks walked over and stopped beside me. That took courage, ma'am. Did it? I shook my head. It took 11 months of planning and a folder full of legal documents. That's not courage, I said. That's preparation. He smiled faintly. Sometimes those two things are the same. He shook my hand. If you need anything else, you've got my number. Thank you for being here, Deputy. Just doing my job. He tipped his hat and walked back to his patrol car. Soon I was standing alone on the porch of my grandmother's house, my house, listening to the waves roll in from the ocean. 6 SUVs, 23 relatives, 15 years of being forgotten. And just like that, it was over. Margaret stayed for about an hour. We didn't talk much. She made tea using the brand new kettle my mother had unknowingly purchased, and we sat quietly in front of the fireplace watching the flames dance. When she finally stood up to leave, she touched my shoulder. "Call me later." "I will." She hugged me, an actual hug, not the polite, performative ones I had grown used to at rare family events. Then she left, and I was alone. Truly alone. For the first time since arriving. I walked slowly through the house. Every room felt different now. Not haunted by exclusion anymore. Just quiet. Full of possibility. The living room still held the framed photo from 3 years ago. 23 smiling faces wearing matching red sweaters. Eleanor Whitmore in the center. I picked up the frame and studied it one last time. Then I slid it into a drawer, face down. On the mantel, the photo of me and Grandma remained. The two of us laughing together on the porch. The only picture in that house that included me. "I did it," I said softly into the empty room. "To you, Grandma." I finally showed up. The fire cracked softly. The waves rolled outside. The house seemed to settle around me like it was exhaling. I sat down in Eleanor's old chair, my chair now, and finally let myself feel everything I had been holding back. The anger, the grief, the strange, hollow ache of winning a battle I should never have had to fight. I cried. Not the quiet tears I allowed myself in Jonathan Reeves's office. The messy kind. The kind I had been holding in for 15 years. By the time I stopped, the sun was setting over the water. I was alone. But for the first time in my life, being alone felt like a choice. My choice. The messages started 3 days after Christmas. My phone, which had been silent through most of the holiday, suddenly exploded with notifications. Group chats I had never been included in before were now adding me. Some messages were angry. "Lucas Bennett. What you did was cruel. It was Christmas. You could have handled that differently. Barbara Turner, my mother's sister. Eleanor would be ashamed of how you treated your family. Hannah Caldwell. I hope you're happy destroying our traditions. Grandma would be rolling in her grave." I didn't respond. But not every message was like that. Some were unexpected. Frank Dawson, who had always been background noise at family gatherings, wrote, "Layla, I didn't realize you weren't being invited. I thought you just chose not to come. I'm sorry." Sarah Bennett, another cousin. "I asked my mom once why you weren't there. She said you had your own life going on. I should have reached out." And another message from a cousin I barely remembered. "I just found out Rebecca told everyone you preferred celebrating alone." That wasn't true, was it? No, it wasn't. During those 3 days, I learned something important. For 15 years, my mother had controlled the story. She told everyone I was private, independent, that I preferred solitude, and people believed her because it was easier than asking questions. Now that the truth had surfaced, some of them were starting to look back, remembering the missing pieces. Of course, not everyone would change their minds. Some people would always believe I was the villain, but others were starting to understand. Margaret called every day just to check on me. It was more family contact than I'd had in years, and for now, it was enough. Thomas Caldwell called on New Year's Eve. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe the screen. "Layla," he said quietly. "Thank you for picking up." I waited. "I need you to know something," he continued, "about the last 15 years. I'm listening." "I didn't know the full extent of what was happening," he said slowly. "I knew Rebecca struggled being around you sometimes, but I didn't realize she was actively excluding you." "How is that possible, Thomas?" I asked calmly. "You were there every Christmas." "She controlled everything," he admitted. "The invitations, the planning, the guest lists. Every time I asked about you, she said the same thing." His voice softened. "Layla likes her space." She said that every single year. And you never checked? I asked quietly. You never called me yourself? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. No, Thomas Caldwell admitted. Why not? Because I trusted her, he said slowly. Then he exhaled. And because it was easier not to. There it was, the same answer Margaret had given, the same reason everyone else seemed to have. It was easier not to. Your grandmother called me once, Thomas added after a moment. About a year before she passed away. She asked me why I let Rebecca erase you. He paused. Those were her exact words. What did you tell her? I asked. I didn't have an answer then, he said quietly. I still don't. Another silence settled between us. I'm not calling to ask forgiveness, Layla, he said eventually. I know I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. What Rebecca did, and what I allowed by doing nothing. I thought about that. 27 years of quiet observation, watching without intervening. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. Is there anything I can do? Not right now, I replied, but thank you for asking. It was already more than my mother had ever done. My mother called a week later. I recognized the number immediately. The same number that had never called on birthdays, never texted during holidays, never reached out in 15 years unless she needed something. I answered anyway. I wanted to hear what she would say. Layla, honey. Her voice was soft and sweet, the careful tone she used when she wanted something. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Has there? I asked. The holidays can be stressful, she continued smoothly. People say things they don't mean. I'm sure we can work this out. Work what out exactly? The house, of course. Her voice stayed warm, but an edge crept in. It has so much sentimental value for the whole family. Maybe we could arrange some kind of shared ownership. I could handle the maintenance and… No. Silence. Excuse me? No, Mom, I repeated calmly. I'm not sharing ownership. I'm not arranging maintenance schedules. This house is mine. Grandma left it to me. Your grandmother wasn't thinking clearly. The will was reviewed for 11 months, I said, by lawyers. It's valid. It's over. Her voice lost its sweetness. You're being unreasonable. I'm being clear, I said. There's a difference. I'm still your mother, Layla. I closed my eyes for a moment. Being a mother requires more than biology, I said quietly. You taught me that. What is that supposed to mean? It means you spent 30 years trying to erase a dead man, I said, and you erased me instead. A pause. And now, I added softly, I'm done. Layla, goodbye, Mom. I ended the call. Then I blocked her number. It was the first time in my life I had ended a conversation with my mother on my own terms. The first time I stopped waiting for an apology that was never going to come. It felt like setting down something heavy I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. A lot of people ask whether I ever forgave my mother. I'll answer that later. But first, what do you think? Do people like Rebecca actually change, or is that just who they are? Type change if you believe people deserve second chances. Type done if you think some patterns never break. No judgment either way. I'm genuinely curious what you think. Now, back to the story. In February, I made a decision. I spoke with my company about switching to remote work. Between my performance and the post-pandemic flexibility most companies had adopted, they agreed. So I packed up my apartment in Raleigh, loaded everything into my car, and drove back to the Outer Banks. The beach house was waiting for me. The first week was spent settling in, moving furniture, reorganizing rooms, painting the bedroom a soft gray blue. Slowly, the space stopped feeling like a museum of family memories I'd never belonged to. It started feeling like home. One afternoon, while cleaning a closet in Grandma's old office, I found a box I had never seen before. Inside were dozens of letters. Most of them had never been mailed. Some were simple thank you notes. Others were birthday wishes or small complaints about the weather. But at the bottom of the stack was one envelope with my name on it. For Layla, When she's ready. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. My dearest granddaughter. You don't need their approval to have value. The only approval that truly matters is your own. They tried to make you small. But small things don't cast shadows. You were never small, Layla. You were simply waiting for your moment. I may not be there to see it. Not because I don't want to be, but because I know this is something you must do on your own. When it's over, remember this. Living well isn't revenge. It's simply the truth. I love you. I always have. Grandma Eleanor. I held that letter for a long time. That weekend, Margaret came to visit. We cooked dinner together, something neither of us had done with family in years. It was quiet, simple, and for the first time in my life, it felt like home. Hannah Caldwell showed up unannounced in mid-March. I was sitting on the porch reading when her white Range Rover pulled into the driveway. She sat in the car for almost a full minute before opening the door. When she finally walked toward me, she moved cautiously, like someone approaching a wild animal. "I'm not here to fight," she said. I set my book aside. "Then why are you here?" She stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "Can we talk?" I gestured toward the empty chair beside me. She climbed the steps and sat down stiffly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I didn't know," she said finally, "about how Mom treated you." I studied her face. "I mean, I knew she favored me," Hannah continued quietly. "That part was obvious. But I didn't realize she was actually keeping you away." "Would it have mattered if you knew?" I asked. She flinched. "I don't know," she admitted after a moment. "That's the honest answer." I watched my sister, my half-sister, the golden child, the one who had always had a seat at the table. "You never questioned it," I said. "Why?" She stared at her hands. "Because you were never there," she said softly. "And I believed what I was told, that you preferred being alone." I leaned back in my chair. "Did that ever make sense to you?" I asked. "That your sister would choose to spend 15 Christmases alone?" She didn't answer. We both knew she had never thought about it that deeply. "I'm not ready to have a relationship with you," Hannah said eventually. "But I wanted you to know, I'm starting to see things differently." "That's more than I expected," I said. She left about 30 minutes later. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was something. Over the next few months, I learned something important about boundaries. They aren't walls, they're doors, with locks. And you decide who gets a key. With my mother, complete silence. No contact, no calls, no messages, no explanations. I didn't owe her closure. She'd had 15 years to ask questions, and she chose silence. With Thomas, it became a single email once a month. Updates about the house. Polite, distant. He had been a passive bystander for 27 years. Observation isn't the same as love. With Hannah, the door stayed open, but only a little. Sometimes she texted me photos of her daughter. Other times, just small things. Comments, observations about life. I replied when I felt like it. No pressure, no expectations. With the rest of the family, it depended. The ones who reached out with genuine apologies received a response. The ones who defended my mother received silence. I wasn't keeping score, but I was paying attention. And Margaret Dawson, Margaret got the spare key. "You're sure about this?" she asked, holding the small piece of metal in her palm like it might suddenly explode. "You're the only one who ever asked about me," I said. "For 15 years, you were the only person who noticed I was missing. I should have done more than notice." "You're doing more now," I replied. "That's what matters." She began visiting every other weekend. We walked along the beach, talked about Eleanor Whitmore, shared memories, and built something new out of something that had once been broken. I didn't slam the door on my family. I just stopped holding it open for people who never planned to walk through. There's a difference between isolation and boundaries. Isolation is loneliness. Boundaries are peace. And for the first time in my life, I was learning the difference. That year, I hosted Christmas. Not for 23 people. Not for people who had spent 15 years pretending I didn't exist. For 4. Margaret arrived first, carrying a casserole dish and a bottle of wine. "Eleanor's recipe," she said, setting the dish on the counter. "I found it in her old cookbook." Next came my 2 closest friends from Raleigh, Beth and Carmen. The women who had quietly become my real family when my actual one forgot about me. They had driven 3 hours just to be there, and finally Daniel Brooks, the deputy who had helped me that Christmas Eve. A few months later we had crossed paths again through a work matter, and slowly we'd become friends. After his divorce the previous year, he had no real place to spend the holiday. When I invited him, he looked stunned. "You barely know me," he said. "I know what it feels like to spend Christmas alone," I replied. "And nobody should have to feel that way if they don't want to." So there we were. 4 people sitting around a dining table meant for 12. The fireplace crackled, candles flickered, the smell of Eleanor's recipe filled the room. On the mantel, I placed the photo of my grandmother and me, the one where we were laughing together on the porch. The only picture in that house that had ever included me. Margaret lifted her glass. "To Eleanor," she said, "and to the granddaughter who reminded us what family is supposed to mean." We clinked glasses. Outside, the waves rolled against the shore. Inside, the conversation flowed easily. No careful walking on eggshells, no monitoring every word, no feeling like an outsider in my own life. I looked around the table at the people who had chosen to be there, people who wanted me there. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for coming." Beth squeezed my hand. "Thank you for inviting us. This place is beautiful." She was right, and for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged there. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stepped out onto the porch. The December air was cold and sharp, carrying the salty scent of the ocean. Stars scattered across the sky like spilled sugar. Somewhere far out in the water, a foghorn sounded. I sat down in Eleanor's old rocking chair, my chair now, and thought about everything that had happened that year. About the 15 years before it, about the person I used to be, and the person I had become. I used to think forgiveness meant pretending nothing had happened, that being the bigger person meant swallowing your pain and smiling through it. I don't believe that anymore. Some things can't be forgiven. Not because you're bitter, but because forgiveness requires acknowledgement. It requires remorse. It requires change. And some people will never offer those things. My mother had tried to call 3 more times after I blocked her, each time from a different number, each time with a different strategy. Anger, guilt, bargaining, but never an apology. Surprisingly, I didn't hate her. I thought I would, but hatred takes energy. It takes up space in your mind and your heart, and I had already given her enough of both. What I felt now was quieter. Something closer to pity mixed with acceptance. She was who she was. She had made her choices, and now I was making mine. Boundaries aren't about punishment. They're about protection. They're about choosing where your energy goes. I had spent 32 years trying to earn a seat at a table that never wanted me there. Now I had my own table, smaller, quieter, but everyone sitting at it had chosen to be there. No obligations, no resentment, no ghosts. I rocked slowly in the chair, listening to the waves. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anything. I was simply here. On Christmas morning, I found something unexpected. I was cleaning up from the night before, putting dishes away, when I noticed something tucked behind my grandmother's photo on the mantel. A cream-colored envelope. My name was written across the front in Eleanor's familiar handwriting. Below it were the words, "To be read on your first Christmas as the owner." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter. "My dearest Layla, if you're reading this, it means you did it. You stopped being invisible. I wish I could be there to see it. I spent years watching your mother try to erase you, and it broke my heart. I should have said more. I should have fought harder. But Rebecca is my daughter, and I kept hoping, foolishly, that she would change. She didn't, and I'm sorry for that. I left you this house because you earned it, not through manipulation or scheming like some people will probably claim, but through love. Pure, simple love that never asked for anything in return. You have your father's eyes, Layla. Did I ever tell you that? Michael was a good man, impractical, yes. A dreamer, certainly, but good. Your mother could never see that. She only saw what she had lost by loving him. But I inherited more than my father's eyes. I inherited his heart, his ability to notice beauty in places most people overlook. People often say that living well is the best revenge, but living honestly, living true to yourself, that's even better. Be true, Layla. Be who you are. And never let anyone make you small again. I love you. I'm proud of you. And wherever I am, I'm watching. Your grandma. I pressed the letter against my chest and closed my eyes. Thank you, I whispered into the quiet room. The fire crackled softly. The ocean waves rolled in the distance. And somehow, I knew she heard me. For most of my life, I believed the problem was me. I thought that if I were more patient, more understanding, or simply quieter, eventually my family would see me and welcome me back into their world. But the truth I learned is much simpler and far more freeing. Sometimes the way people treat you says nothing about your worth. It only reflects the wounds they refuse to face. For years I tried to earn love from people who had already decided not to give it. I waited for invitations that never came, and explanations that were never offered. What I didn't realize back then is that dignity doesn't come from being accepted by others. It comes from choosing not to stay where you are invisible. Setting boundaries didn't make me cruel. It gave me peace. Walking away didn't make me weak. It made space for the people who actually see me. Family, I've learned, isn't defined by blood alone. It's defined by the people who choose to stand beside you when it matters. If there's one thing I hope you remember from my story, it's this. You don't have to shrink yourself to belong anywhere. The moment you stop begging for a seat at someone else's table is the moment you start building your own. And if you've stayed with me until this moment, thank you. Truly. Stories like this matter because there are people on the other side listening, people who may recognize parts of their own lives in what they hear. If this story touched you in any way, please take a moment to like the video. It really helps more people discover stories like this. I'd also love to hear from you. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Travel. If you think someone else might need to hear this message about boundaries, self-respect, and finding your own voice, please share this video with them. And if you enjoy stories about family, resilience, and standing up for yourself, don't forget